The void of space stretched endlessly in all directions, cold and empty except for distant stars that looked like tiny pinpricks of light. The Zilani exploration vessel Gentle Current moved slowly through this darkness, its blue hull gleaming under the light of a nearby star. Captain Nyzes stood on the bridge, his tall, thin frame covered in the soft gray fur that marked his people. His large, dark eyes scanned the readings on his screen while his crew worked quietly around him. The Zilani had been exploring this region near the Kepler Nebula for 3 months now. They were peaceful beings who loved to discover new things. About the universe, their ship was built for science, not war. It carried advanced medical equipment and laboratories, but no weapons. The Zilani believed that all life was sacred and should be protected. "Captain," called out Navigation Officer Kren from his station, "we are picking up something strange ahead. It looks like a small craft, but it is not moving." Nyzes walked over to look at the screen. There, floating in the darkness, was a small metal pod. It was badly damaged, with burn marks across its surface and several holes in its hull. Sparks flickered from broken systems inside. "Can you tell what it is?" Nyzes asked. Kren worked at his controls for a moment. "It appears to be an escape pod, Captain. The design is not familiar to us, but there are faint life signs inside." Nyzes felt his heart skip a beat. The Zilani had 2 hearts, both now beating faster with concern. Someone was trapped in that damaged pod, possibly dying. "Bring us alongside it immediately. Prepare the medical bay and call Dr. Vila to the docking port." The Gentle Current moved closer to the escape pod. Through the viewports, the crew could see that the pod was in terrible condition. Its emergency lights were barely working, and the hull was cracked in several places. Whatever had happened to the ship this pod came from must have been very bad. Dr. Vila arrived at the docking port just as the crew finished bringing the pod aboard. She was smaller than Captain Nyzes, with silver fur that showed her age and wisdom. Her medical kit was already in her hands. "What do we know about the occupant?" she asked. "Very little," Nyzes replied. "The life signs are weak. We need to get them to medical care quickly." The docking port sealed and air filled the chamber. When the atmosphere was safe, Nyzes and Vila opened the pod's damaged hatch. Inside they found something they had never seen before. The being was about the same height as a Zilani, but had no fur. Its skin was pale and smooth, and it wore a dark blue uniform that was torn and burned. The creature's face was covered by an emergency breathing mask that was barely working. "This is not any species we know," Vila said as she checked the being's vital signs. "But it is definitely alive, though barely. We need to get it to the medical bay now." They carefully moved the unconscious being to the medical bay. Vila worked quickly, hooking up her patient to Zilani medical equipment. The readings showed radiation poisoning, severe dehydration, and multiple injuries. "This being should be dead," she told Nyzes. "Whatever it is very tough to have survived this long." Over the next few hours, Vila learned more about their patient. The being had 2 arms and 2 legs like a Zilani, but its body was different in many ways. It had strange markings on its uniform, including symbols that looked like writing. Most interesting of all, it seemed to be trying to communicate even while unconscious, making soft sounds that might be words. On the second day, their patient finally woke up. The being's eyes opened suddenly, and it sat up quickly, looking around in confusion and fear. When it saw Nyzes and Vila, it tried to speak but only made rough sounds because its throat was damaged. Vila gently pushed the being back down onto the medical bed. She spoke in the soft, musical language of the Zilani, trying to sound calm and peaceful. The being did not understand the words, but it seemed to sense that they meant no harm. It pointed to itself and made a sound that sounded like Jake. "Jake," Nyzes repeated, trying to copy the pronunciation. The being nodded and pointed to itself again. "Jake." Over the following weeks, Jake slowly recovered from his injuries. The Zilani medical technology was amazing, able to heal damage that would have been permanent for most species. Vila worked day and night to repair the radiation damage to Jake's body. She grew new, healthy cells to replace the damaged ones and used special treatments to restore his strength, During his recovery, Jake began to learn the Zilani language. He was smart and picked up new words quickly. Soon he could have simple conversations with his rescuers. He told them about his people, the humans, and how his ship, the Meridian, had been destroyed in an accident near a dangerous star. He was the only survivor. Jake learned that the Zilani came from a peaceful world called Dice's Prime. They had no armies or weapons because they believed fighting was wrong. Instead, they spent their time exploring space, learning about other species, and helping anyone they found in trouble. They had saved many beings over the years, never asking for anything in return. "Why do you help strangers?" Jake asked Captain Dices one day as they sat in the ship's garden. The Zilani grew beautiful plants throughout their vessel, making it feel more like a home than a spaceship. Dices was quiet for a moment, his large eyes looking at the stars through the clear roof. "Life is precious, Jake. Every being that thinks and feels and dreams is special. When we find someone in danger, we must help them. It is not about reward or payment. It is about being who we choose to be." Jake felt something warm in his chest. When he heard these words, he had never met people like the Zilani before. Most species he knew were always fighting or competing with each other. But these gentle beings truly believed in helping others just because it was right. As Jake got stronger, he helped around the ship. He was curious about everything and wanted to learn how Zilani technology worked. The crew enjoyed teaching him, and soon he felt like part of their family. Captain Dices treated him like a son, and Dr. Vila fussed over him like a worried mother. After 3 months, the gentle current reached the nearest human outpost at Centauri Station. Jake knew it was time to go home, but he was sad to leave his new friends. On his last night aboard the ship, Captain Dices called him to his quarters. "I have something for you," Dices said, holding out a small crystal pendant on a silver chain. The crystal was clear blue and seemed to glow with its own inner light. "This is a friendship stone from our world. It means that no matter how far apart we are, you will always have family among the Zilani." Jake took the pendant with shaking hands. "Captain, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life and showed me what it means to be truly good people. I promise that humans will remember what you did. If your people ever need help, we will come." Dices smiled and placed a gentle hand on Jake's shoulder. "We do not save people expecting payment, Jake. We do it because life is sacred. But I believe you mean what you say, and that makes me proud to call you friend." The next morning, Jake transferred to Centauri Station. As he watched the gentle current disappear into space, he touched the crystal pendant around his neck. He would keep his promise, he decided. Somehow, someday, he would find a way to repay the debt he owed to the kindest people in the galaxy. 15 years had passed since Jake Morrison first touched the crystal pendant that hung around his neck. He was now Captain Morrison, commanding the heavy cruiser Defiant as it patrolled the outer edges of human space. His ship was sleek and powerful, armed with the latest weapons and shields that human technology could provide. But Jake still wore the Zilani friendship crystal every day, remembering the gentle people who had saved his life. The bridge of the Defiant was busy that morning as reports came in from across the galaxy. Jake sat in his command chair, reading through intelligence briefings on his personal screen. Most of the news was routine, but one report made him sit up straight with worry. "Captain," called Lieutenant Amy Cole from the communications station, "we are receiving a priority message from Earth Command. Admiral Hayes wants to speak with all ship commanders immediately." Jake nodded and activated the main view screen. Admiral Lisa Hayes appeared, her face serious and concerned. She was a tough woman who had worked her way up through the ranks by being smart and brave. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly, and her blue eyes looked tired. "Captains," Admiral Hayes began, "we have received disturbing intelligence from our scouts in the Andromeda Arm. A new threat has emerged that could endanger peaceful species throughout that region of space." The screen changed to show a map of nearby star systems. Red markers appeared on several worlds, spreading outward like a disease. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he recognized the pattern of military conquest. "The Kethver Empire has begun an aggressive expansion campaign, Hayes continued. They are a reptilian species with advanced military technology and no respect for peaceful civilizations. Their strategy appears to be targeting non-military worlds first, using their resources to fuel further expansion. Jake watched as more red markers appeared on the map. The HFY were moving fast, conquering system after system. Their ships were described as massive and heavily armed, designed only for war and destruction. Intelligence reports indicate that the HFY choose their targets carefully, Hayes explained. They prefer to attack species that have no military defenses, viewing them as easy sources of materials and slaves. Our analysts believe their next target will be in the Thyses system. Jake's blood turned cold. The Thyses system was home to the Zilani, the peaceful people who had saved his life all those years ago. He gripped the armrests of his chair tightly as he listened to the rest of the briefing. The Zilani have formally requested aid from the Galactic Council, Hayes said. However, the Council's bureaucratic process could take months to approve any action. According to our intelligence, the HFY invasion fleet will reach Thyses Prime in approximately 6 weeks. After the briefing ended, Jake sat alone on his bridge, staring at the star map. The Thyses system was marked in blue, peaceful, and defenseless. He thought about Captain Thyses and Dr. Vila, wondering if they were still alive after all these years. He thought about the beautiful gardens aboard the gentle current and the gentle beings who believed that all life was sacred. Jake touched the crystal pendant through his uniform shirt. The Zilani had saved him without asking for anything in return. They had shown him kindness when he was dying and alone. Now they were facing extinction, and the galaxy's leaders were too slow to help them. Communications, Jake called out. Get me a direct line to Admiral Hayes, Priority 1. The call took several minutes to connect because Admiral Hayes was in an important meeting. When her face appeared on Jake's screen, she looked surprised to see him. Captain Morrison, what can I do for you? She asked. Admiral, I need to speak with you about the Zilani situation, Jake said. I have personal knowledge of this species that might be important to our response. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Personal knowledge? Explain. Jake took a deep breath and told her the whole story. He described his rescue by the gentle current, his months of recovery among the Zilani, and the friendship he had formed with Captain Thyses and his crew. He showed her the crystal pendant and explained what it meant. These people saved my life when they had no reason to help me, Jake said. They are exactly what the intelligence reports say, peaceful beings who have never hurt anyone. They spend their time exploring space and helping others in trouble. If the HFY destroy them, the galaxy will lose something precious that can never be replaced. Admiral Hayes listened carefully to Jake's story. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Captain, I understand your personal feelings about this situation, but we cannot commit military resources to defend every peaceful species in the galaxy. The political implications of starting a war with the HFY Empire could be enormous. Admiral, with respect, this is not about politics, Jake replied. The Zilani represent everything good that exists in space. They help others without expecting anything in return. They save lives because they believe it is right. If we abandon them now, what does that say about who we are as a species? Hayes sighed and rubbed her forehead. Captain, I will take your information under advisement, but you must understand that decisions like this are made at the highest levels of government. It is not something I can decide alone. After the call ended, Jake felt frustrated and helpless. He knew that Admiral Hayes was a good person, but she was also a military officer who had to follow orders. The political leaders on Earth would probably decide that helping the Zilani was too risky over the next few days. Jake could not stop thinking about the situation. He read every intelligence report about the HFY advance and watched as they conquered more peaceful worlds. The reports described terrible things: entire populations enslaved, cities destroyed, and ancient cultures wiped out forever. Jake called his old friend, Commander Pete Davis, who served on a marine transport ship. Pete had been with Jake at the academy and knew the story of his rescue. Pete, I need your advice. Jake said when they connected by video call. The Zilani are in trouble, and Earth Command is not going to help them. Pete's face was serious as Jake explained the situation. Pete was a tough Marine who had fought in several battles, but he also understood honor and loyalty. Jake, you know what you have to do? Pete said finally. These people saved your life. They showed you what real goodness looks like. If the government will not help them, then good people have to act on their own. But what can one ship do against an entire Kethver fleet? Jake asked. Maybe nothing, Pete admitted. But sometimes doing what is right matters more than winning. Besides, you might be surprised how many other people feel the same way you do. That night, Jake stood alone in his quarters, holding the Zilani friendship crystal up to the light. The blue stone seemed to glow with an inner fire, reminding him of the gentle eyes of Captain Nizes. He remembered the old Zilani's words. About choosing who you want to be, Jake made his decision. He would find a way to help the Zilani, even if it meant disobeying orders. He would not let the kindest people in the galaxy die while he stood by and did nothing. The crystal pendant felt warm against his chest as he began to plan. Tomorrow, he would start making calls to other ship commanders, especially those who knew his story. He would find out which of them still believed in honor and keeping promises. The Zilani had once saved a single human, and now it was time for humans to return that kindness no matter what the cost. Jake Morrison spent 3 sleepless nights making secure video calls to ship commanders across human space. He reached out to every officer he had served with, every friend from the academy, and every captain who might listen to his story. The response surprised him. Many remembered hearing about his rescue years ago, and almost all of them were angry about the government's slow response to help the Zel-Ni. Captain Amy Cole of the destroyer Lightning was the first to offer her support. Jake, I've been following the Kethver situation closely, she said during their encrypted call. These reptiles are monsters who destroy everything beautiful in the galaxy. If our leaders will not act, then we must. Commander Ben Parker of the Marine assault ship Thunder agreed immediately. The Zilani saved your life, and that makes them family, he said. No one abandons family, not while I am breathing. By the end of the week, Jake had contacted over 40 ship commanders. 37 of them pledged to support action to defend the Zilani, even if it meant disobeying direct orders. The movement was growing, but Jake knew they needed official support to have any real chance of success. Admiral Hayes called Jake to her office on Earth Command Station 3 days later. When he arrived, he found her sitting behind her desk with a thick file of reports spread out before her. Her face was tired and stressed. Captain Morrison, I have been receiving many interesting calls from ship commanders throughout the fleet, she said without looking up. It seems your story about the Zilani has been spreading quite rapidly. Jake stood at attention, unsure how much trouble he was in. Admiral, I have simply been sharing facts about a species that helped humanity in the past. Hayes finally looked up at him, and Jake was surprised to see that she did not look angry. Instead, she looked thoughtful and maybe a little sad. Captain, I have been in the military for 30 years. I have seen politicians make decisions based on fear and money instead of what is right. I have watched good people suffer because leaders were too afraid to act. She stood up and walked to the large window that looked out at the stars. I have read your full report about your time with the Zilani. I have also read intelligence reports about what the Kethver do to peaceful species they conquer. The Zilani will be enslaved or killed, and their beautiful culture will be destroyed forever. Admiral, we have to help them, Jake said quietly. The problem is politics, Captain, Hayes replied. The Colonial Defense Council is afraid that attacking the Kethver will start a larger war. They worry about human colonies being targeted for revenge. General Carl Webb and the other leaders think it is too risky to help one alien species. Jake felt his anger rising. So we just let good people die because we are afraid. Hayes turned back to face him. That is exactly what I said to the Defense Council yesterday. I told them that if humanity abandons those who showed us kindness, we lose our soul as a species. Jake was shocked. You spoke to the Defense Council about this? I did more than speak to them, Captain. I demanded that they authorize a rescue. Mission to defend the Zilani. I told them about your story and what these people represent. I argued for 6 hours straight. What did they decide? Jake asked, though he was afraid of the answer. Hayes walked back to her desk and picked up an official document. They voted to take no action. The official position is that humanity cannot risk war with the Kethver Empire to save a non-allied species. Jake felt his heart sink. If Admiral Hayes could not convince the government, then the Zilani were doomed. So that is it? We do nothing while good people are murdered? Admiral Hayes smiled for the first time since Jake had arrived. I said that was the official position, Captain. I did not say that was the end of the story. She handed him the document she had been holding. Jake read it quickly and his eyes went wide. It was a resignation letter from Admiral Hayes, giving up her commission and her position as fleet commander. Admiral, what are you doing? Jake asked. The Defense Council made it clear that no official human military action can be taken to help the Zilani, Hayes explained. However, they cannot stop private citizens from doing what they think is right. If I am no longer a military officer, I can lead whoever wants to volunteer for this mission. Jake stared at the resignation letter, hardly believing what he was reading. Admiral Hayes was giving up everything she had worked for her entire life to help people she had never met. Admiral, you could be court-martialed for this. You could lose your pension, your honors, everything, Hayes shrugged. Captain, I am 60 years old. I have had a good career and earned enough medals to fill a wall. But none of that matters if I let innocent people die when I had the power to help them. The Zilani showed kindness to a stranger because it was right. Now it is time for humans to do the same thing. Over the next week, news of Admiral Hayes' resignation spread throughout the fleet. The story of Jake's rescue and the threat to the Zilani became known to every human in military service. Officers began submitting their own resignation letters, stating that they wanted to volunteer for an independent mission to defend peaceful aliens. The news also reached civilian populations across human space. Jake was invited to testify before the Colonial Senate, where he told his story to billions of people watching on video feeds. He spoke about Captain Nizes and Dr. Vila, about the beauty of Zilani culture, and about what it meant when good people helped strangers without expecting anything in return. The Zilani saved my life because they believed all life was sacred, Jake told the senators. They asked for nothing in return, not money or favors or political agreements. They helped me because it was right. Now they face extinction, and we have the power to save them. The question is not whether we can afford to help them. The question is whether we can afford not to. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Protests erupted on every human world, demanding action to save the Zilani. Veterans organizations rallied behind Jake's cause, organizing demonstrations outside government buildings. Opinion. Polls showed that 87% of humans supported military intervention to defend the peaceful aliens. President. Kate Sullivan found herself facing the biggest political crisis of her career. The people wanted action, but her military advisors warned of the dangers of war with the Kethver Empire. She called an emergency meeting of her cabinet to discuss the situation. The people have made their feelings clear, Sullivan told her. Advisors. They want us to help the Zilani, and frankly, so do I. These aliens represent the best qualities that any species can have. General Webb, the chairman of the military staff, spoke up. Madam President, the Kethver Empire has over 500 warships. If we attack them, they will retaliate against human colonies. We could be starting a war that will cost millions of human lives. And if we do nothing, we tell the galaxy that human friendship means nothing, Sullivan replied. We show everyone that we only help others when it benefits us. The debate continued for hours. Finally, President Sullivan made a decision that would change human history. She authorized the formation of a volunteer expeditionary force to defend the Zilani. Officially, the human government would take no action. Unofficially, any military personnel who wanted to resign their commissions and fight as independents would be allowed to do so. I cannot order our military to start a war, Sullivan announced to the nation. But I will not stop brave volunteers from doing what they believe is right. The Zilani showed kindness to one human, and now humans will show the galaxy what loyalty means. Within 48 hours of the president's announcement, over 60% of the human fleet had submitted resignation letters. Ship commanders, fighter pilots, marines, and support personnel all volunteered for the mission to defend the Zilani. Admiral Hayes, now calling herself Fleet Commander Hayes, began organizing the largest volunteer military force in human history. Jake Morrison looked at the crystal pendant around his neck and smiled. The Zilani had saved one human 15 years ago, and now an entire species was rising to return that kindness. Captain Nizes had been wrong about one thing when they parted at Centauri Station. The Zilani had been expecting payment after all, they just had not known it yet. The massive shipyards of New Geneva Station had never seen anything like it. Hundreds of ships filled the construction bays and docking ports, their hulls gleaming under the bright work lights. Military vessels sat next to converted cargo haulers, private security ships, and even mining vessels that had been hastily fitted with weapons by their crews. The volunteer fleet was unlike anything in human history. Fleet Commander Hayes stood on the observation deck of her new flagship, watching the incredible sight below. The Retribution was the newest and most powerful ship in the human fleet, originally built to be the crown jewel of Earth's defenses. Now it served as the command ship for an army of volunteers who had given up everything to help strangers. "Fleet Commander," called Captain Jake Morrison as he joined her at the viewport. "The final ship counts are in. We have 143 vessels ready for departure, including 12 heavy cruisers, 31 destroyers, 45 frigates, and 55 support ships." Hayes nodded as she watched maintenance crews working on the ships below. "And how many converted civilian vessels?" 78, including cargo ships fitted with missile pods, mining vessels with improvised armor, and even 3 luxury liners that their owners converted into troop transports, Jake replied. "The creativity has been amazing." Among the converted ships was the former mining vessel Rocky Mountain, whose crew had spent their life savings installing military-grade shields and weapons. Captain Tony Reed, a grizzled asteroid miner, had painted for the Zilani on his ship's hull in bright blue letters. Near him floated the converted passenger liner Stardream, whose wealthy owner had stripped out the luxury cabins and filled the space with fighter bays. Commander Amy Cole was working with the fighter squadrons in Launch Bay 7. She had resigned her commission as soon as she heard about the mission, and now she commanded over 200 volunteer pilots from across human space. Some flew military fighters. Others had brought their own private ships, and a few were flying converted racing vessels that had been armed for combat. "Listen up, people," Amy told her pilots during their morning briefing. "We are not a regular military unit anymore. We are volunteers from dozens of different worlds, flying different types of ships, using different communication systems. But we all share the same goal: protecting innocent people from monsters." The pilots came from every corner of human civilization. Lieutenant Sarah Kim had been a test pilot for the latest fighter designs. Captain Bill Santos was a former racing champion who flew a converted speed racer. Even 17-year-old Marcus Webb, who had lied about his age to join the mission, was there with his father's old cargo shuttle that he had somehow turned into a gun platform. In the Marine sections, Commander Pete Davis was organizing the ground forces. Unlike the Space Navy, the Marines would only be needed if they had to board enemy ships or defend Zilani cities. But Pete knew that the Kethver were ruthless fighters, and any combat would be brutal. "We are going up against an enemy that has never shown mercy," Pete told his volunteers. "The Kethver are bigger and stronger than humans. They have natural armor, and they fight with claws and teeth as well as weapons. But they have never faced humans in battle, and they do not understand what we are capable of when we fight for something we believe in." The Marines included regular military volunteers, but also civilian fighters who had joined the cause. Ranch owner Kate Miller had brought a squad of her ranch hands, all expert marksmen. Former police detective Carl North led a team of urban combat specialists. Even a group of college students had somehow convinced Pete to let them join as support. Personnel, Chief Engineer Matt Stone was perhaps the busiest person on the station. Keeping so many different types of ships supplied and operational was a nightmare of logistics. Military vessels needed standard ammunition and parts, but the converted civilian ships required custom solutions for everything. We have ships that run on 12 different types of fuel, use 8 different communication protocols, and fire ammunition that ranges from standard military rounds to improvised mining charges, Matt explained to his team of volunteer engineers. Somehow we have to keep all of them working long enough to fight a battle. The engineering volunteers were just as diverse as the rest of the fleet. Corporate engineers had left high-paying jobs to help maintain the ships. University professors brought their students to help with technical problems. Even retired engineers had come out of retirement to contribute their knowledge. 3 days before departure, a small Zilani ship arrived at New Geneva Station. It was barely larger than a shuttle, and its design was clearly built for peaceful exploration rather than war. The arrival caused excitement throughout the volunteer fleet. As most humans had never seen a real Zilani vessel, Fleet Commander Hayes and Captain Morrison met the Zilani delegation at the main docking port. Jake's heart raced as he recognized the elderly figure stepping off the ship. Captain Nyses looked much older than Jake remembered, his gray fur now almost white and his movements slower. But his large dark eyes were the same, full of wisdom and kindness. "Captain Nyses," Jake said, stepping forward with tears in his eyes, "I never thought I would see you again." The old Zilani smiled and embraced Jake gently. "My young friend, you have grown into a fine leader. When we heard about this fleet gathering to help us, I could not believe that the small human I once rescued had inspired so many people to risk their lives for strangers." With Captain Nyses was a younger Zilani female who looked very much like him. "This is my daughter, Commander Lyra," Nyses explained. "She now commands the Gentle Current, and she wanted to meet the human who has become legend among our people." Lyra stepped forward and bowed respectfully to Jake. "Captain Morrison, your story is taught to every young Zilani. You represent the hope that kindness creates bonds stronger than any treaty or alliance." Fleet Commander Hayes welcomed the Zilani visitors aboard the Retribution, where they were amazed by the size and power of the human flagship. Captain Nyses provided detailed information about Nyses Prime's geography and the locations of Zilani population centers. The peaceful aliens had almost no defensive capabilities beyond some old patrol ships designed for rescue operations. "Captain Nyses, you must understand that many humans will die fighting for your people," Hayes told him during their planning meeting. "The Kethver fleet is much larger than ours, and this battle will be very dangerous." The old Zilani's eyes filled with tears. "Fleet Commander, when we saved Jake all those years ago, we never imagined it would lead to this. We never wanted anyone to die for us. Our people believe that all life is sacred, including human life." "That is exactly why we are here," Jake replied. "The Zilani showed me what real goodness looks like. You helped a stranger because it was right, not because you expected anything in return. Now humans have a chance to show that same goodness." "Commander," Lyra spoke up, "Captain Morrison, our scientists have been studying human military history since we learned of your mission. Your species has a reputation for fierce fighting when protecting others. The Kethver have never faced an enemy like you." Captain Nyses provided intelligence about the Kethver forces that was invaluable to the human planning. The Reptilian Empire used massive ships with heavy armor and powerful weapons, but their tactics relied on overwhelming firepower rather than clever strategy. They had conquered so many peaceful species that they had become overconfident. The Kethver believe that fear wins battles, Nyses explained. They use terror weapons and brutal tactics to make their enemies surrender quickly. But they have never fought an enemy that refuses to be afraid. On the final night before departure, Fleet Commander Hayes addressed the entire volunteer force over the communication system. Every ship in the fleet received her message, from the mighty Retribution down to the smallest converted civilian vessel. "Tomorrow, We begin our journey to Thyses Prime, Hayes announced. We are not a regular military force bound by duty and orders. We are volunteers united by something much stronger, the belief that good people should help each other, no matter the cost. The Zilani saved one human because they thought it was right. Now we will save an entire species for the same reason. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship Defiant, watching the other vessels of the volunteer fleet prepare for departure. He touched the crystal pendant around his neck and thought about the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. 15 years ago, he had been a dying man floating in space. Tomorrow, he would lead humanity's greatest act of kindness into battle against impossible odds. The Zilani had once rescued a human, and now an entire fleet was coming to their aid. Jake smiled as he gave the order to begin the journey to Thyses Prime. It was time to show the galaxy what human loyalty really meant. The human volunteer fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Thyses system just as the twin suns were casting their golden light across the peaceful blue-green world of Thyses Prime. Fleet. Commander Hayes stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the beautiful planet that was home to the gentle species that had saved Jake Morrison 15 years ago. The world looked so peaceful and innocent, with its white cities visible through the clear atmosphere and its orbital gardens floating like jewels in space. Fleet status report, Hayes ordered as her ships took formation around her flagship. Oh. Vessels accounted for Fleet Commander, reported Communications Officer Lisa Park. 143 ships in fighting formation. The converted civilian vessels are taking support positions behind the main battle line as ordered. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came over the secure channel from his ship Defiant. Fleet Commander, our scouts report no sign of the Kethver invasion force yet. We arrived with 3 days to spare. Hayes nodded with relief. The volunteer fleet had pushed their ships hard to reach Thyses Prime before the enemy arrived. Now they had time to set up defensive positions and coordinate with the few Zilani vessels that could assist in the battle on the planet below. The Zilani population was already moving to underground shelters that had been built deep in the mountains. The peaceful aliens had never designed these shelters for war, but rather for protection from natural disasters like asteroid impacts. Now they would have to hope that the thick rock would protect them from Kethver bombardment. Commander Amy Cole was busy organizing her fighter squadrons in the launch bays. Her pilots came from dozens of different worlds and flew many different types of ships, but they had trained together during the journey to Thyses Prime. She knew they were ready to fight, even though most of them had never been in real combat. The four, remember your training, Amy told her pilots over the squadron communication channel. The Kethver fighters are bigger and more heavily armed than ours, but they are also slower and less maneuverable. Use your speed and work together? No heroics, just teamwork. Among her pilots was young Marcus Webb, the 17-year-old who had converted his father's cargo shuttle into a gun platform. His ship was not fast or pretty, but it was tough and carried enough firepower to hurt enemy vessels. Marcus had proven himself to be a natural pilot during their training exercises. Commander Pete Davis and his Marines were aboard the transport ships, ready to board any enemy vessels that the fleet managed to disable. Pete knew that fighting Kethver warriors in hand-to-hand combat would be brutal, but his volunteers were determined to do whatever was necessary to protect the Zilani on the second day. Captain Thyses and his daughter Commander Lyra brought their small exploration ship Gentle Current alongside the Retribution. The old Zilani vessel looked tiny next to the massive human dreadnought, but it carried sensors that were more advanced than anything in the human fleet. Fleet Commander Hayes, Captain Thyses reported from his bridge. Our long-range sensors are detecting movement at the edge of the system. The Kethver fleet has arrived. Hayes felt her stomach tighten as she watched the tactical display. Red contacts began appearing on her screen, dozens of them, all much larger than her ships. The Kethver invasion force was massive, with 300 warships led by a gigantic dreadnought that was twice the size of the Retribution. "Dear God," whispered Lieutenant Park as she stared at the enemy formation. "There are so many of them." The Kethver fleet moved slowly into the system, their dark ships looking like predators stalking prey. Their formation was designed to inspire fear, with the largest vessels in front and smaller ships spread out in a wide net. At the center of the formation was the enemy flagship, a monstrous vessel covered in weapons and armor, a communication. Signal came from the Kethver flagship, and Hayes ordered it to be put on the main screen. The bridge filled with the image of Warlord Scare, the reptilian commander of the invasion force. He was enormous even for his species, with dark green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to glow with cruelty. When he spoke, his voice was deep and threatening. "I am Warlord Scare of the Kethver Empire," the alien announced. "This system now belongs to us. The weak creatures on the planet below will surrender immediately or be destroyed. Any ships that do not withdraw will be eliminated." Hayes stepped forward so that Scare could see her clearly. "I am Fleet Commander Hayes of the Human Volunteer Defense Force. This system is under our protection. If you want this world, you will have to go through us first." Scar's eyes widened with surprise and then narrowed with anger. "Humans! We have heard of your species, but you are far from your territory. You have no business interfering with Kethver expansion." "We made it our business when you decided to attack our friends," Hayes replied calmly. "The Zilani are under human protection. Now, turn around and leave, or face the consequences." The reptilian warlord threw back his head and laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You bring 100 ships against 300, and you threaten me. Your species is either very brave or very stupid," Hayes smiled coldly. "You are about to find out which one." The communication ended, and both fleets began moving into battle formation. The Kethver ships spread out in a massive line, trying to surround the smaller human force. Their ships were huge and heavily armored, built like flying fortresses designed to crush enemies through sheer firepower. The human fleet took a different approach. Hayes ordered her ships into a tight formation that would allow them to support each other. The volunteer fleet might be outnumbered, but they had something the Kethver did not. They were fighting for something they believed in. "All ships, this is Fleet Commander Hayes," she announced over the fleet communication channel. "Today we fight for the Zilani, but we also fight for everything good in the universe. We fight for the idea that kindness should be rewarded, not punished. We fight so that peaceful people can live without fear. Make every shot count." The battle began when the Kethver opened fire with their long-range weapons. Massive energy beams and missile volleys streaked across space toward the human fleet. Hayes watched as her ships scattered to avoid the incoming fire. Their pilots, using every trick they knew to stay alive, returned fire. Hayes ordered, "Target their largest ships first." The human fleet unleashed its own weapons, sending waves of missiles and energy beams toward the enemy formation. The volunteer ships might be smaller, but they were faster and more maneuverable than the Kethver vessels. Captain Morrison's Defiant led a daring charge against the enemy line. Followed by the destroyers Lightning and Thunder, Commander Cole launched her fighter squadrons, and the space around Isis Prime filled with small, fast ships darting between. The larger vessels, the human pilots used hit-and-run tactics, striking at enemy ships and then disappearing before the Kethver gunners could target them. Young Marcus Webb proved that his converted cargo shuttle was tougher than it looked. His ship took several hits from enemy fighters but kept fighting, its improvised weapons doing surprising damage to Kethver vessels. "Come on, you ugly lizards," Marcus shouted over his radio. "Let's see how you like human stubbornness." The battle raged for hours, with both sides taking heavy losses. The human fleet lost several ships, including the converted mining vessel Rocky Mountain, whose crew died fighting to the last man. But the Kethver were also suffering, their rigid battle tactics no match for human creativity and determination. The turning point came when Captain Morrison led a desperate assault on the enemy flagship. The Defiant, followed by a squadron of destroyers and converted civilian ships, charged straight at Warlord Scar's massive dreadnought. The enemy ship's weapons tore into the attacking human vessels, but they kept coming. "All Marines, prepare." For boarding action, Commander Davis announced as his transport ships followed the attack. "We are going to take that flagship and end this battle." The human Marines, led by Pete Davis himself, blasted their way through the HFY ship's armor and fought a vicious battle in the corridors of the enemy vessel. The reptilian warriors were bigger and stronger than humans, but the Marines fought with a fury that surprised their enemies. They were not just fighting for victory, they were fighting for the gentle people who had shown kindness to a stranger 15 years ago. Pete Davis and Warlord Scare met in personal combat on the bridge of the HFY flagship. The reptilian warlord was twice Pete's size and armed with natural claws that could cut through armor, but the human Marine had something his enemy did not. He was fighting for love, not conquest. The fight was brutal and bloody, but in the end, Pete's determination won. Warlord Scare fell, and with their leader dead, the HFY fleet began to break apart. Some ships tried to continue fighting, but most fled when they realized their cause was lost. As the enemy retreated, Fleet Commander Hayes looked around at what remained of her volunteer fleet. Nearly 30 human ships had been destroyed, and thousands of brave volunteers had died defending people they had never met. But Thizes Prime was safe, and the Zilani would live to continue their mission of helping others. The morning sun of Thizes Prime cast golden light across the gathering crowds in the capital city of New Harmony. Millions of Zilani had emerged from their underground shelters to witness something their peaceful species had never seen before: a victory celebration for warriors who had died protecting them. The gentle aliens filled the streets and parks, their soft gray fur shining in the sunlight as they looked up at the sky, where the human fleet still orbited their world. Fleet Commander Hayes stood on a platform in the center of the city, surrounded by the surviving commanders of the volunteer force. Captain Jake Morrison was beside her, his arm in a medical support device from injuries received during the battle. Commander Amy Cole wore bandages on her face from when her fighter had been hit by enemy fire. Commander Pete Davis walked with a limp from his fight with Warlord Scare, but his eyes were bright with pride. The Zilani had built this platform overnight using their advanced construction technology. It was made of a beautiful blue crystal that seemed to glow with inner light, and it was tall enough that every person in the massive crowd could see the human heroes who had saved their world. Captain Nices approached the platform, moving slowly. Because of his great age, but with dignity that commanded respect from everyone present. His daughter Commander Lyra walked beside him, carrying a ceremonial staff that had been carved from wood taken from the first tree planted on Thizes Prime, the old Zilani's large dark eyes were filled with tears as he looked up at the humans who had sacrificed so much for his people. "People of Thizes Prime," Captain Nices began, his voice amplified by Zilani technology so that everyone in the crowd could hear him clearly. 15 years ago, our ship the Gentle Current found a dying human floating in space. We saved his life because our people believe that all life is sacred. That human was Jake Morrison, and today he stands before us as the leader of those who saved our entire world. The crowd of Zilani made a soft humming sound that was their way of showing approval and gratitude. The sound grew louder as more voices joined in, until the entire city vibrated with the musical tone of millions of grateful beings. Jake stepped forward, still wearing the crystal pendant that Captain Thizes had given him all those years ago. The small blue stone caught the sunlight and seemed to shine like a star against his uniform. When he spoke, his voice was strong despite his injuries. "Captain Thizes, people of Thizes Prime, my fellow humans came here not because we expected anything in return, but because you showed us what true goodness looks like," Jake said. "When you saved my life, you taught me that kindness creates bonds stronger than any treaty or alliance. Today, those bonds have been proven in battle." Commander Lyra stepped forward and presented Jake with a new crystal pendant, this one much larger than the friendship stone he already wore. The new crystal was perfectly clear and seemed to contain swirling lights like a captured piece of the aurora. "Captain Morrison, this is the heart of Thizes, our most sacred artifact. It has been kept in our most holy temple for 1,000 years. We give it to you as a symbol that humans and Zilani are now one people, bound by love and sacrifice." Jake accepted the crystal with trembling hands. He had seen many honors and awards during his military career, but nothing had ever meant as much to him as this gift from the people he had helped save. I accept this on behalf of all the humans who fought here, especially those who will never return home. Their sacrifice made this moment possible. Fleet Commander Hayes spoke next, addressing both the Zilani crowd and the human crews listening from their ships in orbit. The battle we fought here was about more than saving one world. It was about proving that good people will stand up to bullies, no matter the cost. The Kethver Empire thought they could destroy peaceful civilizations without consequences. They learned that as long as humans exist, kindness will have protectors. In the weeks that followed the battle, news of the human victory spread across the galaxy. The story of how volunteers had traveled across space to defend strangers inspired people everywhere. Other peaceful species began reaching out to humanity, asking for protection against aggressive neighbors. The Galactic Council, embarrassed by their slow response to the Zilani crisis, passed new laws requiring immediate aid for species under attack. The political effects on Earth were just as dramatic. President Kate Sullivan's approval ratings reached record highs as the human population celebrated their species' heroic actions. The volunteer fleet members were welcomed home as heroes, with parades in every major city. Many of them chose to remain in the military, forming the core of a new galactic defense force dedicated to protecting peaceful civilizations. Admiral Hayes, her rank restored by a grateful government, was given command of this new force. Her flagship was the captured Kethver Dreadnought, which had been repaired and renamed Promise Keeper. The massive ship served as a symbol that human friendship came with serious consequences for those who threatened it. Jake Morrison was promoted to admiral and given a choice of any command he wanted. Without hesitation, he chose to establish a joint human-Zilani defense force headquartered at Dices Prime. The peaceful aliens committed their advanced medical technology, manufacturing capabilities, and scientific knowledge to the Alliance, while humans provided military protection and strategic planning. The new partnership between the two species produced amazing results. Zilani healing technology combined with human military medicine saved thousands of lives across the galaxy. Zilani construction methods helped humans build space stations that were both beautiful and functional. Human tactical knowledge helped the Zilani design early warning systems that could detect threats long before they arrived. Commander Amy Cole established a joint training program where human pilots learned Zilani sensor technology while Zilani scientists learned human combat tactics. The program produced some of the best starfighter pilots in the galaxy, beings who combined human aggression with Zilani wisdom. Commander Pete Davis created a new type of marine unit that included both humans and volunteer Zilani who wanted to help protect other peaceful species. The Zilani were not natural fighters, but their advanced medical skills made them invaluable for rescue operations and treating wounded civilians. Chief Engineer Matt Stone worked with Zilani technicians to design new types of ships that combined the best of both technologies. These vessels were fast and powerful like human warships, but also included the medical facilities and scientific equipment that made Zilani ships so useful for exploration and rescue work. 3 years after the Battle of Dices Prime, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the joint human-Zilani vessel Eternal Bond. The ship was a masterpiece of combined technology, equally capable of conducting scientific research or fighting enemies who threatened peaceful civilizations. His crew included both humans and Zilani working together as equals. Admiral, reported his communications officer, a young Zilani named Kess, who had been inspired by the human example to join the defense force. We are receiving a distress call from the Peaceful Garden System. A species called the Vorthan are under attack by raiders. Jake looked at his mixed crew and smiled. The humans showed eager determination while the Zilani displayed calm wisdom. Together they represented the best qualities of both species. Set course for the Peaceful Garden System, maximum speed. It seems we have work to do. As the Eternal Bond jumped to hyperspace, Jake touched both crystal pendants he now wore around. His neck, the original friendship stone from Captain Theises, reminded him of where this journey had begun. The heart of Theises reminded him of what that simple act of kindness had grown into. Captain Theises had been right all those years ago when he said that helping others was about choosing who you wanted to be. The Zilani had chosen to be kind to a stranger, and that choice had changed the fate of two civilizations. Now humans and Zilani worked together to spread that same kindness across the galaxy, proving that compassion was not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. In a universe often ruled by fear and conquest, the alliance between humans and Zilani had become a beacon of hope. They showed other species that different peoples could work together, that strength could be used to protect rather than conquer, and that the bonds formed by genuine friendship were stronger than any empire built on fear. The work continued. But they no longer stood alone. In the vast darkness of space, compassion had found its champions, and the galaxy was becoming a kinder place because of it. The Zilani had once rescued a human, and now an entire fleet of friendship sailed among the stars, ready to answer any call for help.